Winter had already taken everything from Ethan Walker: his land, his future, his peace. Each night, the snow fell heavier, burying a ranch that no one came to anymore, except memories of a war that never truly ended. Then one morning, his dog stopped. Rex, silent, loyal, trained like a soldier, began digging in a frozen mound no one had touched for decades. What Ethan uncovered beneath the ice wasn't water, it was steel. And someone noticed. Strangers came in the night. Footsteps circled his home. Fire followed. But when the truth finally surfaced, when the secret buried for 60 years was exposed, Ethan realized this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about loyalty, about courage, and about a bond strong enough to bring light back into the darkest winter. Winter had claimed everything. The ranch lay buried under a heavy blanket of white, the kind of snow that swallowed sound and erased edges. Fence lines disappeared. Tire tracks vanished overnight. Even the wind seemed to move more carefully here, whispering instead of howling, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Ethan Walker stood on the porch of his weather-beaten farmhouse, unmoving. He wore the same faded multicam jacket he'd owned for years, the fabric worn thin at the elbows, the pattern dulled by time and weather. A black knit cap pulled low beneath a fraying U.S. Army veteran hat shadowed his eyes. 2 dog tags rested against his chest, dull metal tapping softly when the wind shifted. On his left wrist, a large black military watch ticked steadily, too loud in the quiet, like a heartbeat in an empty room. Snow dusted his shoulders. He didn't brush it off. Beside him sat Rex. The German shepherd was motionless, his brown and black coat dusted white, breath rising in slow, controlled clouds. His ears stood erect, sharp against the gray sky. A tactical collar wrapped his neck, dark and utilitarian. Rex stitched cleanly into the fabric. Not a pet's collar, a working one. Rex's eyes never left Ethan. They had been standing like that for a long time, man and dog, watching the snow drift across land that no longer felt alive. The ranch used to have cattle, used to have movement, sound, purpose. Now the troughs were frozen solid, the barn half collapsed under the weight of last winter's storms, and the fields stretched out in every direction like a white graveyard. Letters from the bank sat unopened on the kitchen table inside. Ethan already knew what they said. He didn't need to read them to feel the weight pressing down on his chest. Foreclosure had a smell to it. Cold paper, ink, finality. Rex shifted slightly, pressing his flank closer to Ethan's leg. Ethan didn't look down, but his hand dropped automatically, resting on the dog's neck. The warmth there grounded him, pulled him back from a place his mind drifted to too easily. Dusty roads, distant explosions, the ringing silence that followed. "I know," Ethan murmured. It wasn't clear whether he meant the bank, the winter, or the memories. Beyond the frozen pasture, at the far edge of the property, something rose from the snow like a scar that refused to heal. The mound. It stood taller than the farmhouse, wider than the barn, its surface uneven and hardened, the snow never quite settling on it the way it did everywhere else. The ground around it was bare, dark earth showing through even in the dead of winter. Nothing grew there. Nothing ever had. Ethan's grandfather used to call it cursed ground. Ethan didn't believe in curses. He believed in terrain, in structure, in patterns that told a story if you looked long enough. And every instinct he had told him the same thing. Something was under there. Water, maybe. Warmth. A spring that hadn't frozen, something deep enough to survive winter, something that could save the ranch. He exhaled slowly, the breath fogging the air. Behind him, the old bulldozer sat half buried in snow, yellow paint chipped and rusted, a relic from another decade. Ethan had spent the last 2 days clearing it, checking the engine, changing fluids with numb fingers that didn't feel cold the way they used to. Cold was familiar. Danger was familiar. Hope was not. He stepped off the porch, boots crunching against the packed snow, and Rex rose instantly, falling into step at his side. They moved together toward the machine, a practiced rhythm. No leash, no commands needed. Ethan climbed into the cab and turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life, the sound tearing through the stillness like a gunshot. Black smoke curled into the white sky. The bulldozer vibrated beneath him, solid and real. Rex stopped several yards away, sitting back on his haunches. He watched. The blade lowered, steel scraping against ice and frozen soil as Ethan eased the machine forward. Snow peeled away in heavy curls, revealing dark, compacted earth beneath. Everything felt normal, too normal. The first pass shaved away the top layer. The second dug deeper, the blade groaning in protest as it met resistance that wasn't rock. Not exactly. The mound loomed closer, massive and unmoving, its surface scarred but unyielding. Ethan tightened his grip on the controls. Then Rex broke the silence. It wasn't a bark. It was a sharp, urgent sound, high and raw, nothing like the controlled alerts Ethan was used to. Rex sprang to his feet, ears pinned back, muscles taut. He lunged forward, then back, pacing in tight circles near the base of the mound. He barked again. Louder. Ethan pulled the throttle down, the engine dropping to an idle. The sudden quiet was jarring. "What is it?" Ethan called out. Rex ignored him. The dog charged at the mound, digging furiously at one specific spot beneath the snow, claws tearing through ice and dirt. He stopped only to bark again, sharp and insistent, then resumed digging, breath coming fast, eyes wild but focused. Not chasing prey, not afraid. Warning. Ethan's spine tightened. He'd seen this before, not in dogs, but in men. The look right before something went wrong. The tension before chaos. He shut the engine off completely. The silence rushed back in, thick and heavy, broken only by Rex's frantic digging and the soft hiss of falling snow. Ethan climbed down from the cab, boots sinking into the drifts. Each step toward Rex felt measured, deliberate, like approaching a wire you weren't sure was live. Rex stopped digging and looked up at him, eyes locked on Ethan's face. There was no panic in them now, only urgency. Ethan crouched beside him, resting a gloved hand on the dog's shoulder. Beneath the fur, Rex trembled, not from cold, but from restraint, like a soldier holding position under fire. "Easy," Ethan said quietly. Rex didn't move. He stared back at the ground, then at Ethan again, ears flicking, body angled protectively between his handler and the spot he'd exposed. Snow melted where the dog had been digging, revealing dark soil and something else beneath it. Smooth, flat, wrong. Ethan reached out and brushed the dirt away. His glove struck metal. The sound rang out sharp and hollow, echoing in the winter air. Ethan froze. Rex let out a low, vibrating growl, deep in his chest, steady and controlled. Ethan straightened slowly, eyes fixed on the place where steel hid beneath earth and snow. A familiar pressure settled behind his eyes, a tightness he hadn't felt in years. Not fear, recognition. Whatever was buried here hadn't been meant to be found. Ethan rested his hand on Rex's collar, feeling the solid presence there anchoring him. Snow continued to fall, soft and relentless, covering their tracks as if trying to erase the moment entirely. But some things didn't stay buried. Not forever. The metal did not belong to the land. Ethan knew that the instant his glove struck it. The sound, sharp, hollow, cut through the winter hush in a way stone never could. Rock absorbed. Earth dulled. This rang back at him, clean and unforgiving. Steel. Rex's growl deepened, not louder, just heavier. It vibrated through the dog's chest like a warning sent through bone. He planted himself between Ethan and the exposed spot, body angled, head low, eyes never leaving the ground. Ethan stayed still. Snow fell around them in lazy spirals, settling on his shoulders, catching in Rex's fur. The world beyond the mound felt distant, unreal, as if everything outside a tight perimeter had been muted. Ethan crouched again, slower this time, and brushed more dirt away with the edge of his glove. A flat surface emerged, dark gray, pitted, old. Frost clung to it in thin veins, tracing lines that weren't natural. The metal was flush with the earth, perfectly level, as if it had been poured into place and forgotten. Forgotten on purpose. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had seen this kind of precision before, not on ranches, not in counties with one grocery store and a single blinking stoplight. This was military. He leaned back on his heels and scanned the tree line, the white fields, the distant ridge swallowed by fog. Nothing moved. No engines. No lights. Just snow and silence. Too clean. Rex shifted, paws crunching softly. His ears flicked once, then settled again, erect and alert. The dog wasn't afraid of the metal. He was afraid of what lay beneath it. Ethan reached for the small shovel strapped to the bulldozer's side and worked the frozen earth loose around the edges. The soil was dense, compacted far beyond what winter alone could explain. Each scrape revealed more of the shape, square corners, straight lines, a hatch, at least 4 feet across. Ethan stopped digging. He sat back, breath steady, the old familiar calculation running through his head. Observe, assess, do not rush. The snow picked up, wind pushing it sideways now, needles against his face. He stood and stepped away, giving Rex space. The dog rose immediately and followed, stopping when Ethan stopped, eyes still fixed on the hatch like it might move. Good, Ethan said quietly. He didn't know who he was reassuring. They backed away from the mound together. Ethan climbed into the bulldozer and turned the key again, the engine shattering the quiet. He angled the blade not toward the hatch, but away from it, pushing snow back over the exposed metal until it disappeared beneath white once more. He wasn't ready. Not yet. By the time Ethan shut the machine down, dusk had crept in, turning the sky the color of old bruises. Rex trotted ahead of him toward the house, pausing every few steps to look back, making sure Ethan was still there. Inside, the farmhouse was cold and dim. Ethan didn't bother turning on the overhead lights. He shrugged off his jacket, steam rising faintly from the fabric, and poured himself a mug of coffee he knew would taste burned and thin. Rex lay near the door, head on his paws, ears angled toward the outside world. The bank letters waited on the table. Ethan moved them aside without opening a single one and sat down, staring at the grain of the wood, at the small nicks and scars that told a story he understood better than words. His mind kept circling back to the sound. Steel on steel. He hadn't planned on digging that deep today. He had told himself it was about water, about survival. But part of him, the part that never truly left the mountains, had known better. Night fell hard. The wind rose, rattling the windows, driving snow against the siding in waves. Somewhere in the dark, a branch cracked under the weight of ice. Rex lifted his head, alert. Ethan followed his gaze. Headlights. They cut through the trees at the far end of the drive, faint at first, then brighter as they moved closer. The sound of tires crunching over packed snow followed, deliberate, unhurried. No one came out here after dark. Ethan stood. Rex rose silently, moving to his side without command, his body rigid, ready. The vehicle stopped short of the house. The engine idled for a moment, then shut off. Doors opened and closed. Solid, confident sounds. Two figures approached, dark shapes against the snow. Ethan didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't have to. His presence alone, tall and still in the doorway, said enough. A knock came. Polite. Firm. "Mr. Walker?" a voice called. Calm. Educated. Wrong. Ethan opened the door just enough to fill the gap with his body. Rex stepped forward automatically, his head and shoulders blocking the opening, eyes locked on the men outside. They wore long coats, dark and expensive, shoes unsuited for snow, but somehow spotless. One was older, gray at the temples, his face relaxed in a way that never quite reached his eyes. The other was younger, restless, gaze flicking past Ethan toward the darkness behind him. "We're with a federal agency," the older man said, holding up a badge just long enough to be seen, not long enough to be studied. "We received a report of unauthorized excavation on this property." Ethan said nothing. Rex let out a low growl, not loud, not aggressive, controlled, a promise. The younger man shifted his weight, irritation flashing across his face before he masked it. "Routine," the older man continued smoothly. "We just need to take a look. Environmental compliance." "Come back with a warrant," Ethan said. His voice was flat, steady, carrying no emotion at all. The older man's smile thinned, just a fraction. "We don't need one," he replied. "Not for—" "Yes," Ethan cut in. "You do." Silence stretched between them, snow drifting down, melting on dark coats. The older man glanced at Rex, assessing. He knew the sound that dog was making. He also knew what would happen if he took another step forward. "Very well," he said after a moment. "We'll be in touch." They turned and walked back to the vehicle without another word, their footsteps leaving crisp impressions in the snow. The engine started, headlights sweeping across the house, across Ethan's face, lingering for half a second too long. Then they were gone. Ethan closed the door and slid the deadbolt home. Rex stayed at his side, muscles coiled, listening until the sound of the engine faded completely. Ethan rested his forehead against the door. Not the bank, not the county. Something else. Later that night, long after the wind had settled and the house creaked into uneasy sleep, Ethan stood at the window, staring out at the mound. Moonlight caught the snow, turning the field into a pale, endless sheet. The mound rose dark against it, defiant. Rex sat beside him, eyes glowing faintly in the reflected light. Ethan knew then that whatever was buried out there wasn't finished. Not with him. Not with Rex. And winter, he had learned long ago, didn't erase the past. It preserved it. Dawn arrived without warmth. The sky lightened from black to a dull, colorless gray. The kind of morning that felt unfinished, like the world hadn't decided whether it wanted to exist yet. Snow still fell, lighter now, drifting instead of driving. settling into the grooves and scars of the land. Ethan Walker was already awake. He sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold long ago, eyes unfocused. Rex lay near the door, alert even in stillness, ears pivoting at every creak of the house, every whisper of wind. They had not slept. Ethan stood and pulled on his jacket, the faded multicam stiff with dried snow. The dog tag slid into place against his chest, a familiar weight. He checked his watch. Black, oversized, military issue. The seconds moved with quiet indifference. "Stay close," Ethan said. Rex rose instantly. Outside, the cold bit harder than the night before. The mound loomed in the distance, darker now against the pale morning, its shape sharper in the flat light. The bulldozer sat where Ethan had left it, half buried, patient. They moved together. Ethan uncovered the hatch again, clearing snow with slow, deliberate motions. The steel emerged unchanged, untouched by time or weather, as if winter had no authority here. Frost traced its edges, outlining perfect angles that did not belong to nature. Ethan braced himself and reached for the pry bar. The first pull did nothing. The second sent a jolt up his arms, rattling his bones. The metal groaned, a deep, reluctant sound, like something waking after a long sleep. Ethan leaned his weight into it, boots slipping on ice. Rex backed away, hackles rising. With a sharp crack, the seal broke. Air rushed out of the opening in a long, hollow hiss, a breath released after decades of silence. It carried a smell that hit Ethan like a memory. Metallic, sterile, wrong. Not rot, not decay. Something preserved. Rex barked once, sharp and urgent, then retreated several steps, whining low in his throat. Ethan stepped back, heart pounding. He forced himself to breathe through his nose, shallow and controlled. "Easy," he muttered, though the word felt thin. He grabbed a flashlight from the cab and shone it down. A ladder descended into darkness, metal rungs disappearing into black. The beam didn't reach the bottom. Ethan swallowed. He tied a rope around the bulldozer's blade, tested the knot twice, then clipped the other end to his belt. Habit. Muscle memory. Things you did without thinking because thinking got people killed. Rex stood at the edge of the opening, body rigid, eyes locked on Ethan. "Stay," Ethan said. Rex did not move, but his ears flattened, his tail stiff. Ethan swung his legs over the edge. Cold air wrapped around him as he descended, heavier with every rung. The smell grew stronger, coating the inside of his throat. His boots hit solid ground after 15 feet, the sound echoing too loudly in the confined space. The flashlight beam cut through the dark. Steel walls, rivets, flaking paint, pipes running along the ceiling like veins. The room was small, 10 feet by 10 at most, and it pressed in on him immediately. Too close, too tight. His chest constricted. The walls seemed to lean inward, the ceiling lowering inch by inch. The smell changed, thickened, blending with something else. Dust, sweat, gun oil. The hum of the wind above faded, replaced by a distant ringing in his ears. The flashlight trembled. Suddenly, he wasn't there. He was back under a mountain, crouched in a narrow passage, the weight of rock above him crushing, the air stale and hot. His squad leader whispered something he couldn't hear. His own breathing sounded too loud, too fast. A muffled explosion thudded somewhere deep, shaking dust loose. The tunnel groaned. Collapse. The words slammed into his mind. Ethan staggered backward, shoulder hitting steel, his lungs locked, refusing to draw air. His vision tunneled, edges darkening. "Get out! Get out now!" He fumbled for the rope, fingers slick with sweat inside his gloves. Then he heard it, not the echo of memory. Rex. A bark, sharp and frantic, echoing down the shaft from above. It cut through the panic like a blade. Another bark followed, closer this time, accompanied by the scrape of claws against metal. Rex was trying to get to him. Ethan gasped, the word tearing out of him. I'm here. He sucked in a breath, then another, forcing air into lungs that burned in protest. He pressed his forehead against the cold wall, grounding himself in the present. Steel, cold, snow. I'm okay, he said louder, the words steadying him. I'm okay. The barking continued, relentless, rhythmic. Anchor. Ethan straightened, wiping his face with a shaking hand. He swept the flashlight across the room again, slower this time, forcing his eyes to see what was actually there. In the far wall, partially hidden behind a panel, was an opening, a tunnel leading deeper underground. He didn't go near it. Instead, he turned to a metal shelf bolted to the wall. On it sat a thick, leather-bound book, warped with age and moisture. Beside it, a boxy device with a meter and a needle resting just above 0, a Geiger counter. The needle ticked faintly. Not safe, not catastrophic. Wrong. Ethan grabbed the ledger, its weight solid and real in his hands. Then the counter. On the floor beneath the shelf lay a small steel case, military gray, sealed tight. Rex barked again, higher now. Coming up, Ethan called. He clipped the counter to his belt, slung the ledger under his arm, and grabbed the case. The rope tugged at his waist as he climbed, boots ringing against the ladder. Light spilled down from above, blinding after the dark. He emerged into the cold air in a rush, collapsing onto the snow on hands and knees. The clean, sharp scent of winter filled his lungs, glorious and painful. Rex was on him instantly. The dog whined, licked Ethan's face, pressed his weight against him, grounding him in warmth and motion. His whole body trembled, not fear, but release. I'm here, Ethan whispered, fingers burying into Rex's thick fur. You did good. They stayed like that for a long moment, snow settling around them, the hatch gaping open beside them like a mouth that hadn't finished speaking. Ethan sealed it again, hands steady now, covering the metal with snow and earth until it vanished from sight. Back inside the house, he laid the items on the table. The ledger, the counter, the steel case. Rex lay at his feet, eyes never leaving him. Ethan opened the ledger, rows of numbers, technical language, dates from decades past. He didn't read it yet. He didn't need to. Some things spoke without words. Outside, winter pressed closer, quiet and patient. Whatever had been buried beneath the ice had woken up, and it knew it had been found. Snow had a way of telling the truth. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and painfully bright. Sunlight bounced off the fields in blinding sheets, turning the ranch into an open wound of white. Every tree branch sagged under ice. Every sound carried farther than it should have. Ethan stepped out onto the porch and stopped. There were tracks in the snow. Not his, not Rex's. Bootprints crossed the yard in a straight, deliberate line. Deep impressions, heavy soles, spaced evenly, men who walked with purpose, not hesitation. The tracks circled the house once, then angled toward the north pasture, toward the mound. Ethan didn't move. He just stood there, breath slow, eyes following the story written in the snow. Rex emerged beside him silent. The dog froze the instant he saw the tracks. His body stiffened, muscles locking under his fur. His ears came forward, rigid, and a low sound built in his chest. Not a growl yet, but something close. Ethan dropped a hand to Rex's collar. "Easy," he said. They followed the tracks together. The snow around the mound was disturbed. Fresh footprints overlapped older ones, circling the area where Ethan had uncovered the hatch. Someone had been careful. No digging, no tools. But they had stood there for a long time. Long enough to look. Long enough to confirm. Ethan crouched, brushing snow aside. The surface was smooth. They hadn't found it. Yet. Rex sniffed the ground, moving in a tight arc around the disturbed area, nose low, tail stiff. He stopped suddenly and looked up at Ethan, ears flicking toward the tree line. Ethan felt it too. They weren't alone. The sound came first. An engine, distant but unmistakable. It grew louder, then cut off somewhere beyond the ridge. A moment later, two figures appeared between the trees, walking openly now, no attempt to hide. The men from the night before. They wore the same dark coats, same clean shoes that had no business surviving winter like this. The older one walked with easy confidence, hands visible, posture relaxed. The younger man stayed half a step behind, eyes scanning everything. Rex stepped forward. This time, he didn't growl. He stood squarely in front of Ethan, head low, shoulders broad, a living barrier of muscle and intent. His eyes never left the men. The older man stopped several yards away and smiled. "Mr. Walker," he said, as if greeting an old friend. "Cold morning." Ethan didn't answer. "You've been busy," the man continued, nodding toward the bulldozer, the mound. "We were hoping to save you some trouble." Rex's lips curled slightly, just enough to show teeth. The younger man noticed. His hand twitched near his coat pocket before the older man lifted a finger. Subtle, practiced. "Let's keep this simple," the older man said. "What you found out there doesn't concern you." Ethan tilted his head a fraction. "On my land," he replied. "It does." The smile faded. The older man's eyes hardened, calculating. "You're a veteran," he said. "You understand classified material, national security, things that don't belong in civilian hands." "I understand property lines," Ethan said. Silence stretched between them, heavy as the snow-laden air. The younger man shifted, impatience bleeding through. "You don't want to do this the hard way," Rex growled then, low, deep, unmistakable. The sound echoed across the open field, carrying a promise no one misinterpreted. The older man raised both hands slowly. "No one's threatening you," he said smoothly. "We're offering a courtesy." He took a step forward. Rex lunged, not fully, not an attack, but enough to snap the air inches from the man's knee. Snow sprayed as the dog landed, teeth bared, body coiled like a spring held under steel tension. The older man stopped instantly, his breath fogged once, sharp. "That dog's trained," he said quietly. "Yes," Ethan replied. They stood like that for a long moment. 3 men and a dog in a white field, the world holding still around them. "We'll be back," the older man said finally, "with paperwork." Ethan didn't blink. The men turned and walked away, their footprints cutting new scars into the snow. Rex didn't move until they were gone. Back inside the house, Ethan locked the door and leaned against it, eyes closed. The encounter replayed in his mind. Not the words, but the posture, the way the men had looked at the mound. Confirmation. Rex sat in the center of the room, facing the door, alert and unmoving. That night, the sound came again. Tires on snow, slow, careful. Ethan moved to the window just enough to peer out. The vehicle sat at the edge of the property, lights off, engine idling. It didn't approach, it didn't leave, it waited. Rex stood beside him, a low rumble building in his chest, hackles raised now, no attempt to hide the threat. Ethan rested a hand on the dog's head. "They're not here for me," he murmured. "Not yet." The vehicle remained until dawn. When it finally drove away, it left nothing behind but tracks, and a certainty Ethan couldn't shake. This wasn't an investigation, it was containment. And Rex, sitting silent at his side, had crossed a line of his own. He wasn't just watching anymore. He was guarding. The town was quieter than Ethan remembered. Snow packed the streets into narrow lanes, muffling footsteps and swallowing sound the way winter always did. Storefronts were dark, windows fogged, a few lights burning behind glass like watchfires in a long night. This was the kind of place that remembered things. Births, deaths, who left, who never came back. Ethan parked across from the old brick library and sat for a moment with the engine running. Rex watched the street from the passenger seat, ears up, eyes tracking movement that didn't exist. His breath fogged the window in slow, steady bursts. "Stay," Ethan said. Rex didn't argue. He never did. Inside, the library smelled like paper and lemon oil. The warmth hit Ethan all at once, thawing fingers that had stopped registering cold. At the far desk sat Margaret Hale, small and sharp-eyed despite her years, a wool shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She looked up the instant Ethan stepped inside. "Well," she said softly, "I was wondering when you'd come." Ethan stopped a few feet away. "You knew my father?" he said. Margaret nodded. Everyone knew Thomas Walker. He kept his head down, asked careful questions. She studied him for a moment, her gaze lingering on the dog tags, the posture, the stillness that never quite relaxed. "You found something," she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't answer right away. He glanced toward the windows, the street beyond, then back to her. "I need to know what he worked on," he said. "Before he died." Margaret's hands tightened around her mug. "That was a long winter," she said quietly. "People don't like to remember it." "I do," Ethan replied. Silence settled between them, thick and uneasy. Outside, snow slid from a roof with a soft thump. "Your father worked as a systems engineer," Margaret said at last. "Contracted, government-funded, but off the books. Everyone knew there was a facility up north, buried deep, long before your time." "What kind of facility?" Margaret hesitated. "Experimental," she said. "That's the word they used." She rose slowly and disappeared into the back, returning with a thin folder yellowed with age. She set it on the desk, but didn't open it. "There was an incident," she continued. "Something went wrong. People were told it was a geological anomaly, equipment failure, official statements." Ethan leaned forward. "And unofficial." Margaret met his eyes. "Men started getting sick. Water testing stopped. Trucks came in at night and left before dawn. And then your father died." "Heart attack," Ethan said flatly. "That's what they said," Margaret replied. "He was 46, ran 5 miles every morning." Ethan closed his eyes. The weight of it settled into his chest, heavy and bitter. "He tried to stop it," she said. "I know that much. He came in here, asked me to pull old survey maps, hydrology reports. He said something had leaked, something they couldn't put back." Ethan stood. "Thank you," he said. Margaret reached out, touching his sleeve. "Be careful," she whispered. "The men who bury things like that don't stop watching." Outside, Rex was on his feet the moment Ethan stepped into the cold. His tail was stiff, his gaze locked on the far end of the street. Ethan followed his line of sight. A dark SUV idled near the corner, engine humming softly, tires already pointed toward the highway. They weren't hiding anymore. Back at the ranch, night fell fast. Snow thickened, blotting out the stars. Ethan set the items from the bunker on the kitchen table and stared at them like they might bite. The ledger, the Geiger counter, the steel case. Rex lay near the door, restless now, rising at every sound. Ethan opened the case. Inside were 3 reel-to-reel tapes, their labels faded but legible. He dug through the closet until he found it. His father's old tape recorder, wrapped in canvas, untouched for decades. The machine hummed to life. Static filled the room, then a voice. Steady, measured, unmistakable. "This is Thomas Walker, December 12, 1967. Ethan's breath caught. "If you're hearing this, then the official record has failed." The tape hissed. "The project is not what we told the Oversight Committee. The tests compromised the aquifer. Radiation levels are low but persistent. They've ordered the site sealed and the data classified." Ethan gripped the edge of the table. "I've filed objections. I've been removed from duty. There are men watching the house." The voice faltered for the first time. "If something happens to me..." A sharp knock rattled the door. Rex exploded to his feet, a deep, thunderous growl ripping from his chest. He charged the door and stopped inches from it, teeth bared, body braced. Ethan killed the tape and reached for the rifle mounted by the door. Another knock. Louder. "Mr. Walker," a familiar voice called. "We need to talk." Rex lunged this time, full force, slamming against the door, wood shuddering under the impact. Snow shook loose from the frame. Ethan stepped in, hand gripping the dog's collar, feeling the power coiled beneath the fur. "Back away," Ethan said. Silence. Footsteps retreated. Through the window, Ethan watched the SUV pull away, its taillights swallowed by snow. Rex stood rigid long after it was gone, chest heaving, eyes burning. Ethan knelt and pressed his forehead to the dog's. "You're not just warning anymore," he murmured. "You're holding the line." Rex didn't look away. Later, alone with the tape again, Ethan pressed play. "They'll bury this," his father's voice said. "But ground remembers. Water remembers. Someone has to." The tape clicked off. Outside, winter pressed in, patient and unforgiving. Ethan sat in the dim kitchen, Rex at his feet, and understood the truth at last. This wasn't about land. It was about legacy. And someone had decided Ethan Walker was standing too close to it. The fire started without warning. One moment the ranch slept beneath falling snow, quiet and sealed. The next, orange light flared against the windows like a second sunrise, violent and wrong. Rex was on his feet instantly. His growl tore through the house, deep and feral, a sound Ethan hadn't heard before. Not caution, not warning, threat. Ethan was already moving. Boots hit the floor, jacket on, rifle in hand. He crossed the room in 3 strides and yanked the door open. Heat slammed into him. The barn, what remained of it, was burning. Flames climbed the outer wall in sheets, devouring dry timber beneath the snow. Black smoke twisting into the night sky. The contrast was unreal. Fire roaring in a world of white, sparks carried sideways by the wind, hissing as they vanished into snowdrifts. Arson. No accident burned like that in winter. Ethan ran. He grabbed the fire extinguisher mounted by the door and charged across the yard, boots slipping on ice. The heat grew stronger with every step, biting his face, stealing breath. He aimed the nozzle and squeezed. White foam burst forward, vanishing into steam the instant it touched flame. Useless. Behind him, Rex stopped short at the edge of the yard. He did not follow. He turned back toward the house. That was when the back door exploded inward. The sound reached Ethan a heartbeat too late. A hollow crack followed by splintering wood. He froze mid-stride, instinct screaming, diversion. "Rex!" he shouted. The dog was already gone. Ethan dropped the extinguisher and sprinted back, lungs burning, heart pounding with a different kind of fear. He hit the porch just as Rex slammed into the intruder. The man was big, broad shoulders, masked. He carried himself like someone trained. Low center of gravity, deliberate movements. He barely had time to raise his arm before Rex hit him full force, 90 pounds of muscle and teeth. Rex didn't bark. He struck like a missile, jaws clamping down on the man's forearm with a wet, sickening sound. Bone didn't break, but something tore. The man screamed, raw and high, staggering backward as Rex shook, dragged, anchored. Ethan didn't hesitate. He crossed the kitchen in 2 steps and drove his shoulder into the man's chest, slamming him into the counter. The rifle skittered across the floor. Ethan grabbed the man's collar and drove a fist into his throat. Short, precise, enough to collapse air. The man went down hard, choking, clutching at Rex, who still held on, teeth locked, eyes wild. "Rex!" Ethan commanded. The dog released instantly and stepped back, chest heaving, blood darkening the fur around his muzzle. Outside, the barn collapsed inward with a thunderous crack, sending a wave of heat through the broken doorway. The roar was deafening. Headlights flared at the edge of the property. Another vehicle. Ethan dragged the intruder across the floor and shoved him against the wall, pinning him there. "Who sent you?" Ethan demanded. The man laughed, a broken, gurgling sound. Too late. A sharp crack split the air. Ethan knew the sound. High-velocity round. The diesel drum by the barn detonated. The world turned white-hot. The blast punched the air from Ethan's lungs and hurled him backward. The windows shattered. Glass rained down. The shockwave hit like a physical blow. Heat washing over him, stealing sound, stealing time. For a fraction of a second, he wasn't in his kitchen. He was back on a dirt road, the sky on fire, metal screaming, his body frozen while the world exploded. IED. His knees buckled. The man took advantage of it. He shoved free, bolted through the broken doorway, disappearing into smoke and snow. Ethan dropped to one knee, breath ragged, vision tunneling. The ringing in his ears swallowed everything else. His hands shook, useless. Heavy. Move. Move. A weight slammed into his side. Rex. The dog pressed hard against Ethan's hip, shoulder driving into him again and again, whining sharply, insistently. Not panic, command. Ethan's fingers dug into Rex's fur, grounding himself in heat and life and now. "I'm here," he gasped. "I'm here." The ringing faded. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had seen the fire. Rex moved to the doorway, standing guard, body rigid, head high, teeth still stained red. Smoke curled around him, sparks drifting past like dying stars. By the time the fire crews arrived, the barn was gone. Ethan stood in the snow, face blackened, jacket scorched, watching the remains smolder. Rex sat beside him, silent now, eyes never leaving the darkness beyond the tree line. The sheriff tried to ask questions. Ethan gave none. Later, After the trucks were gone and the night settled back into uneasy quiet, Ethan found it on the kitchen floor. A wallet. It had fallen during the struggle, leather cracked, one corner dark with blood. Inside was a driver's license and tucked behind it, a laminated access card. Defense logistics contractor. A name, a company, a thread. Ethan closed his hand around it. Across the yard, the snow melted into black slush where fire had ruled. Steam rose into the cold night, carrying the smell of loss. Rex sat at attention, ears forward, body blocking the doorway like a sentry who had chosen his post and would die before abandoning it. Ethan knelt and rested a hand on the dog's shoulder. "They crossed the line," he said quietly. Rex did not look at him. He watched the dark. The message came at dawn. Not a call. Not an email. A printed note slipped beneath the door sometime during the night, the paper stiff from cold. Ethan found it when he opened the house to the gray, swirling world outside. "Bring what you took. Come alone." Before noon. Below it was a set of coordinates, scrawled in block letters, precise and confident. Rex stood beside him, reading Ethan's body language the way he always did. His ears were forward. His tail was rigid. The low, steady growl in his chest never rose, never fell. "They want to trade," Ethan said quietly. Rex didn't move. The wind picked up, driving snow sideways, turning the land into a featureless void. A whiteout was rolling in fast. One of those storms that erased distance and direction, that swallowed sound and time alike. Perfect cover. Ethan packed deliberately. The ledger and tapes stayed hidden. Instead, he filled a steel case with scrap metal, old tools, weight enough to convince anyone who lifted it. He checked the rifle, then left it behind. This wasn't that kind of meeting. Rex watched every movement, muscles coiled. Ethan opened the truck's rear door and pointed to the footwell behind the passenger seat. "Load up," he said. "Quiet. Stay until I call you." Rex hesitated for half a second, then obeyed, crawling into the dark space and lying flat, disappearing beneath a blanket Ethan pulled over him. Only the dog's steady breathing gave him away. They drove into the storm. Visibility dropped to nothing within minutes. The road vanished beneath drifting snow, landmarks erased. Ethan drove by memory, by instinct, by the same calm he'd used under fire when maps meant nothing and survival meant everything. The coordinates led them to a shallow valley, walls of rock rising on either side like frozen jaws. The wind screamed here, funneled and amplified, stealing heat and sound. The SUV waited in the center of the clearing, dark and still. Two figures stood outside it. The older man, calm, hands loose at his sides. The younger, arm bound in a sling, posture tight with pain and rage. Between them knelt a third figure, bound, hooded, smaller. Ethan stopped the truck and stepped out, hands visible, the steel case heavy in his grip. Snow lashed his face, needles of ice biting into exposed skin. "Put it down," the older man called, his voice carrying easily through the wind. "Then step back." Ethan did as told, setting the case on the snow. "Let her go," he replied. The younger man laughed. "After we check." He moved forward, pistol trained on the kneeling figure, and kicked the latch. The lid sprang open. Silence. Then a snarl of fury ripped from the younger man's throat. "It's fake." That was the signal. Ethan lifted two fingers to his mouth and whistled, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the storm. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the back window of the truck exploded outward. Rex burst from the vehicle like a living weapon, a blur of brown and black against white. He didn't hesitate. He didn't bark. He went straight for the younger man. The impact knocked him off his feet, pistol flying into the snow. Rex hit him chest first, jaws snapping shut on the man's good arm, dragging him down with brutal efficiency. The older man moved fast, drawing his weapon, but Ethan was already closing the distance. Training took over. Ethan slammed into him, driving him into the SUV with bone-jarring force. The gun went wide. Ethan trapped the man's wrist and twisted, hard. Something cracked. The weapon dropped. The wind howled, the storm swallowing everything else. Shouts, impacts, the sounds of violence reduced to motion and intent. Rex released and repositioned instantly, teeth flashing, body between Ethan and the downed man. He stood over the younger attacker, growling now, deep and relentless, daring him to move. Ethan knelt and ripped the hood from the captive. It was Margaret Hale. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with defiance. "You okay?" Ethan asked. She nodded once. Sirens cut through the storm. Not distant this time. Close. The older man froze, eyes flicking toward the canyon walls as red and blue lights began to bleed through the snow. Vehicles surged in from both ends, boxing the clearing in, engines roaring. State troopers spilled out, weapons raised. "Hands up!" someone shouted. Ethan stepped back, raising his hands. Rex responded instantly, backing off and sitting, chest heaving, eyes locked but controlled. A perfect release. The younger man screamed as medics moved in. The older man stared at Ethan with something like disbelief. "You don't know what you've started," he said. Ethan met his gaze. "I do." The arrests were quick, efficient. The storm swallowed the aftermath as if eager to erase it. By the time the convoy rolled out, the whiteout had thinned, the world reassembling itself piece by piece. Ethan drove back in silence. Rex rode beside him now, no longer hidden, posture relaxed for the first time in days. He rested his head against Ethan's arm, a quiet, grounding weight. At the ranch, dawn broke through thinning clouds, pale light spilling over a land scarred but standing. Ethan buried the originals where no one would look, beneath the earth that had started it all. He sealed them in steel and silence, hidden in a place only he and Rex knew. The government would pour concrete, issue statements, close doors. But truth had weight, and memory had teeth. Rex sat beside him as the last shovel of snow-covered earth settled into place, ears forward, vigilant as ever. Ethan stood, straightened his jacket, and looked out across the white fields. "This isn't over," he said softly. Rex's tail gave a single, slow wag. They turned back toward the house together, the storm finally breaking behind them, leaving only quiet, and a future neither of them would face alone. Winter loosened its grip slowly, not all at once, not cleanly, the way it always did, reluctant, resentful, leaving scars behind. Snowbanks shrank into dirty walls along the fence lines. Ice cracked and sighed on the creek. The land breathed again, cautiously, as if unsure whether it was safe to do so. Ethan Walker watched it from the porch. He wore the same faded multicam jacket, the fabric darker now where smoke had stained it weeks earlier. His U.S. Army veteran cap sat low on his brow. The dog tags rested against his chest, steady, familiar. The black military watch ticked on, indifferent to seasons or endings. Beside him, Rex sat at attention, not rigid, not tense, present. The government came 3 days after the arrests. They arrived in unmarked trucks and official vehicles that wore authority like a uniform. Men and women with clipboards, clean gloves, and language polished smooth by repetition. They spoke of containment, environmental review, legacy infrastructure. They did not speak of radiation. They did not speak of death. They poured concrete over the mound. A thick white slab, stamped with warnings and seals, rose where the earth had once been broken. Do not disturb federal property, a tombstone dressed up as procedure. Ethan stood behind the boundary tape and said nothing. Rex sat at his side, ears turning as machines roared, as steel groaned, as the past was buried again, this time with paperwork. No one asked Ethan about the tapes. No one asked about the ledger. They assumed they had won. They left behind a promise of investigation and a press release that said everything and meant nothing. The storm passed. The news cycle moved on. But some things didn't move. The ranch survived. Not because of government mercy, but because people had watched the footage. The fire, the storm, the dog. Donations came quietly, then loudly. The bank called, careful now, cooperative. Terms were renegotiated. Time was bought. A new barn frame rose against the pale sky, steel beams cutting clean lines through the thinning snow. Ethan worked alone most days, methodical, efficient, rebuilding without hurry. Rex stayed close. Always close. At night, Ethan listened to the land, the creaks, the settling, the long sighs of wood and earth cooling under stars. He slept better than he had in years, not deeply, not easily, but honestly. The nightmares still came sometimes, pressure, darkness, the moment before impact, but they didn't own him anymore. When they came, Rex was there, a weight, a breath, a reminder. Ethan learned something in those quiet weeks. The war hadn't ended when he left it. It had ended when he chose to stop running from it. One morning, after the last snow melted from the north pasture, Ethan walked out to the concrete slab alone. He stood there for a long time. Rex waited a few yards back, giving him space but never turning away. "They think it's over," Ethan said quietly. Rex's ears flicked. Ethan walked past the slab and stopped at a patch of ground just beside it. Ordinary earth, unmarked, unremarkable. He knelt and pressed his palm into the soil, feeling the cold still trapped beneath the surface. 5 feet down, sealed in steel, the truth waited. The ledger, the tapes, the proof, not to be used. Not yet. Insurance. Ethan stood and brushed dirt from his gloves. "You don't fight every battle," he said. "Some you just make sure you can finish if you have to." Rex looked up at him, eyes calm, unreadable, loyal. They walked back together. Spring crept in like a cautious truce. Grass pushed through the thawed ground. The air smelled different, cleaner, sharper. The creek ran clear. The ranch felt alive again. On a quiet afternoon, Ethan sat on the porch steps with a cup of coffee, watching Rex patrol the fence line. The dog moved with unhurried confidence, checking corners, sniffing the wind, returning to sit at Ethan's feet like clockwork. Not guarding, just being ready. Ethan thought about his father then, not with anger, not with grief, but with clarity. A man who had done his job, spoken when it mattered, and paid for it quietly. "I didn't forget," Ethan said softly, though no one else was there to hear it. Rex's tail tapped the porch once. That night, the sky cleared completely. Stars burned cold and sharp overhead. Ethan stood in the open field, breath fogging the air, the land stretching wide and honest around him. For the first time in a long while, he felt still. Not empty, not numb. Still. He reached down and rested a hand on Rex's head, fingers threading into the thick fur. It's over, Ethan said. Not the truth, not the world, just this. Rex leaned into the touch, solid and warm, eyes fixed on the dark horizon where nothing moved and nothing threatened. They went inside together, the house quiet, the fire low, the night unbroken. Somewhere beneath concrete and snow, a secret slept. Above it, a veteran and his dog held the line. Not with weapons or noise, but with memory, patience, and the unspoken understanding that loyalty doesn't fade when the fighting stops. It just stands watch.